I feel conflicted about Uncharted. I don't think it's a terrible game, but there are just so many things that suck about it. It looks impressive, it's decently exciting, the plots, while simple, are engaging at least, and there are numerous set pieces that look really freaking cool and tense, but all of these aspects of the game are buried under the most tiring, repetitive gameplay you will ever see. This game would be so much more enjoyable if it just shut the hell up half the— In case you didn't notice, enemies spot you a lot in this game. Every 10 seconds you get thrown into a never-ending gauntlet of guys all shooting at you, and you're repeatedly forced to hide behind cover, peek out once, shoot somebody, then go behind cover and wait for your health to recover because every single guy keeps shooting you at the same time. On top of that, the gunfire in this game is just so fucking loud, I'm convinced it can cause some sort of damage. Every so often, you're forced out of cover by some fucking asshole who chucks a grenade, and when you try to move around, you can't because the dodge roll mechanic doesn't fucking work, so you can't get into a good position unless you take your time, but then if you take your time, you just die, so you're sometimes put into a position where you have to keep flailing around all over the place to avoid dying and starting the whole thing over again. These games have a really hard time trying to pace the action and keep things exciting. Use the shooter sections too much and you run the risk of having players get tired, but using them too sparingly might make people bored. Uncharted's 2 and 3 have a better time with this because they decide to make these shooter sections scripted and surrounded by a bunch of explosions and shit, but it's still a problem. There's not much variety in gameplay, and on the rare occasion that there is, it's mostly terrible, like those stupid water sections in the first game where the fucking waterfall makes it nearly impossible to fucking get up the waterfall. Get up, okay. The gameplay is mostly split into two portions, the shooty-shoot and the button-mashy climbing. Both sections are honestly kind of awful. There are two segments of the shooter sections where you try and fail to sneak past all of the guards without having to pull out the gun, and the part where you just hide behind a box and kill off people one by one. By the way, the stealth is a lie. What the game will do is tell you that you can make it past the guards by sneakily taking them out.
Alright, just try to be subtle. We don't want to attract any unnecessary attention.
Subtle.
But instead of actually making it possible, they'll put like one guy away from everyone else, while the rest just cluster together, making it impossible to take out everyone without getting caught. And don't even try to sneak past them, because the game thought of that too. And then there's the climbing. Oh god, this is the most boring shit in the world. You spend the entire time just silently tapping the X button to climb, and every so often your fat ass breaks the ledge you're climbing on and you slip. Which would be exciting and some form of challenge if it wasn't scripted and if it didn't happen every time you try to climb a fucking wall. It gets stale when you do it over and over and over and over again. You know what? Speaking of climbing, this game is really bad at signposting. It's really hard to tell what to do sometimes. The game makes no real distinction between what's in the background and what you can actually interact with. Sometimes the most challenging and frustrating parts of the game is figuring out what you're supposed to do. The game can also be surprisingly buggy. There are so many instances where the climbing mechanic just completely screws you over. Sometimes when you punch, your character does this. Stealth takedowns are also hindered by whatever this is. At one point, Drake just starts floating, and while this is all pretty funny, it fucking sucks to deal with while playing. You know, the more I talk about this game, the more convinced I am that I hate it. Nothing about this game is really fun. It's all samey bullshit that hurts your ears, like the boss fights. Oh yeah, the boss fights are the fucking worst. I'm not even gonna talk about the third game where the final boss was just a glorified QuickTime event, which is less annoying than the other two, but by far the most lazy that Naughty Dog came up with. The first game makes you go through multiple phases killing this guy's goons as he keeps running away, and you have to deal with so many fucking guys, and if you come out of cover at the wrong time, you just get killed in one hit. Oh yeah, and if you die no matter which phase of the fight you're in, you have to restart the fight all the way from the beginning. It's even worse in 2, where you're trapped in this tiny circle, and you have to keep going around in the same pattern time and time again, as this fucking dick keeps throwing 15 billion grenades that one-shot you, saying the same shit over and over again. And you have to hope for good RNG, and if you die in any of the phases, you have to restart the whole fight from the beginning. And then once you beat the boss, you get the flimsiest "we're not so different, you and I" speech from the villain, which doesn't even come close to working, and you know what? The stories in these games kind of suck. For the most part, it's just a straightforward action-adventure story, but every time they try to develop or affect Nathan's character in any way, it just utterly fails. Let's take the second game for example. Partway through the game, Nathan gets depressed for some reason, talking about how everything he does turns to shit, and he's all sad about the fact that some guy's gonna take over the world, but after everything's said and done, after Nathan takes down Lazarevich and saves the world, what does he do in the third game? The exact same thing. You gotta wonder if Nathan's ever gonna realize that that if he never solved these puzzles for the villains, they never would have gotten far. The games love giving Nathan flaws that seem like they'll have an effect on his character, but they never actually do. For example, the third game's whole thing was that Nathan's recklessness would hurt those around him, specifically Sully, and it turns out the game is right. Sully dies, although it's not even a result of Nathan's abrasive nature, since it just kind of happened, and because it happened so suddenly, there's no real emotional impact, but whatever. The point is, Sully died. Except he actually didn't, and it turned out that he was hallucinating, so there wasn't actually anything to worry about, and Nathan never has to change or better himself. Welcome Nathan Drake, the character that constantly gets character development, yet no character development at all. Hey, remember Jeff? The Uncharted storyline also has some inconsistencies in the relationship between characters. In the first game, Nathan and Sully were portrayed to have a sort of platonic relationship, like they weren't really close. It felt as if they were just working with each other and they could abandon each other at any time, as evident by the fact that Nathan just fucking booked it after Sully got shot. He didn't even shed a single tear, there's no moment of reflection, there's no regretting of his actions, he just moves on with his day and replaces him with Elena. So it only makes sense that in the third game we find out that Sully was actually a father figure for Drake and the two shared a deep past together, and Sully would die for Drake too. In Uncharted 2, it's implied that Drake and Elena broke up even though they got together at the end of Uncharted 1, but then they got back together at the end of Uncharted 2, but at the start of Uncharted 3, it's implied that they broke up again and then they got back together by the end of that game. You know, if you have to keep breaking up and getting back together again, maybe this isn't the healthiest relationship. It's also really clear that the game favors having cool scenarios over a coherent plot. Why does this random mook have the key to Shambhala when Lazarevich was the one who took it from you? How did the key wind up all the way over here when you had it by the end of the train sequence? Why the fuck are there just cans of propane lying around on the train in the first place? If you really think about it, you can poke a lot of holes into the game's set pieces. This also leads to some inconsistencies in gameplay. Because you're sneaking into a museum, of course you have to hang off a ledge of a rooftop and pull someone off the edge, sending them to their doom and watching them die. You know, just completely ignoring the fact that Nathan didn't want to kill any of these security guards? Guess he doesn't count? I admit, I'm being kind of nitpicky right now, but it's hard not to be when everything about this game just kills me on the inside. I really hate a lot of what this game does. It would be fine if they were a bit more restrained, or if they actually did something fun more often, like the vehicle sections where you have a huge gun and you're shooting down a bunch of cars, or a helicopter, or I don't know. But unfortunately, this portion of gameplay that I think is actually fun is the most minute part of the game. The Uncharted series is a frustrating, annoying, tedious, repetitive mess of a game, and I just wanted to voice my complaints with the entire series, not including 4 because I didn't play it. That's all I wanted to say, and I'll be going now.